What is it?
It was extremely special. It was very strong.
Strong in the what?
Our relationship was very strong and very serious and very real.
Ann-Margret, the stunning actress and singer, has long been linked to Elvis Presley, the iconic king of rock and roll. Their legendary affair has been the subject of speculation and intrigue for decades. But now, at the age of 84, Ann-Margret has finally broken her silence about their tumultuous relationship. In a candid interview, the actress shared intimate details about her time with Elvis, revealing secrets about their passionate romance and the painful truths about their relationship that have remained hidden for so long. Stay with us to find out what she said. The Golden Encounter. It was the spring of 1963, and Hollywood was alive with color, glamour, and endless dreams. Movie sets shimmered under the California sun, cameras flashed, and the air carried the sound of laughter and ambition. Every studio corner buzzed with excitement as directors shouted instructions and makeup artists hurried between trailers. The stars of that golden age glided through the backlots, their faces known across the world, their every move watched and whispered about in gossip columns. In the middle of this glittering whirlwind was Ann-Margret, the Swedish-born beauty whose name had started to echo through Hollywood. She was young, vibrant, and full of energy that felt impossible to contain. Just a few years earlier, she had been an unknown girl with a bright smile and a fiery spirit. But now, she was the woman everyone was talking about. Her performance in Bye Bye Birdie had turned her into a sensation. Critics called her a star in the making, and studios were eager to have her name on their posters. When the call came that she would be cast in Viva Las Vegas, Ann-Margret felt her heart skip a beat. The movie was to be a musical, full of energy, rhythm, and charm, and she would be starring opposite the most famous man on earth, Elvis Presley. The announcement made headlines before filming even began. The pairing sounded almost too perfect. The king of rock and roll and Hollywood's rising fire. The first day on set was filled with excitement. The crew prepared the lights, the music team tuned their instruments, and the director called for quiet. Then, a moment of calm swept through the studio as the door opened and Elvis Presley walked in. He was dressed simply but carried an unmistakable presence. The crew turned their heads, whispering as his easy smile and confident stride filled the room with a kind of electricity that was hard to describe. Ann-Margret stood nearby, watching him with quiet curiosity. The moment their eyes met, something seemed to shift. It wasn't loud or obvious, it was silent but powerful. The connection between them was immediate, something that neither of them had planned or expected. The room seemed to fade for a second, leaving only the two of them standing in that glowing moment under the bright studio lights. When the cameras began to roll, their chemistry burst onto the screen like lightning. Their dance scenes were filled with energy and laughter. Their movements felt natural, as if they had known each other for years. Between takes, they talked, shared jokes, and discovered how much they had in common. They both loved motorcycles, music, and the thrill of performing. Yet beneath the laughter, there was something deeper, a quiet understanding that neither could explain. People on set began to notice. The director saw it in the way they looked at each other. The crew felt it when they rehearsed, and the gossip columns outside the studio started to buzz with rumors. "They're supposed to play lovers on screen," one photographer murmured, "but it looks like the cameras are only catching half of what's real." Elvis was already a legend, carrying the weight of fame wherever he went. The world adored him, but that same adoration often left him lonely. Ann-Margret, on the other hand, was fresh and full of joy. She moved through life with a free spirit and a spark that made people feel alive just by being near her. Together, they were like fire and melody, different but somehow in perfect rhythm. During rehearsals, the line between acting and reality started to blur. Their laughter became genuine, their smiles softer, and their scenes too natural to be just performances. The cameras captured the warmth between them, but what the film couldn't show was what happened when the lights went off. The glances, the quiet moments, and the lingering looks began to tell a story no script could ever write. By the time filming neared its end, the connection between Elvis and Ann-Margret had grown stronger than anyone had expected. It was a bond neither fame nor caution could easily break. The whispers around the studio grew louder, but both of them stayed silent. They carried on with their work, pretending nothing was happening, though everyone could see what was written on their faces. As the final scenes were filmed, there was a bittersweet feeling in the air, as if everyone knew something powerful had taken root. What began as a simple movie had turned into something deeper, something fragile and real. The director called "cut" for the last time, and the lights dimmed across the soundstage. The film was complete, but something between them was just beginning. The air felt heavier that day, filled with emotion that words couldn't capture. And this was the basis for their relationship. Stay with us. The secret romance. The bright lights of the Viva Las Vegas set had barely dimmed before something deeper began to stir between Elvis Presley and Ann-Margret. What started as playful chemistry in front of the camera slowly grew into something real behind the scenes. Quiet, secret, and impossible to ignore. Their laughter, which began as part of the script, turned into something genuine. Their eyes lingered a little longer after each take. What began as acting soon became truth. Away from the cameras, they started to find comfort in each other's company. The world around them was loud and demanding, filled with expectations neither could escape. Yet, when it was just the two of them, time seemed to slow down. They shared quiet dinners in hidden hotel suites and took late-night drives through the glowing streets of Las Vegas, the city lights flickering across their faces. Sometimes they would park far from the crowds, listening to the soft hum of the desert wind while they talked about everything that fame had taken from them: peace, privacy, and the feeling of being understood. Ann-Margret saw the side of Elvis the public never knew. Behind the legend was a man both charming and deeply lonely. He would tell her about the pressure he felt, the endless touring, the image he had to protect, the weight of being the king of rock and roll. Ann-Margret, in turn, shared her own fears, of being misunderstood, of losing herself in Hollywood's glittering maze. Their laughter often replaced words, and in that laughter they found peace. They were different in many ways. She was spontaneous and full of fire, while he carried a quiet sadness that came from years under the spotlight. Yet their connection was easy and natural. They didn't have to pretend. When Elvis played the piano in the still hours of the night, Ann-Margret would listen, resting her head against his shoulder. Sometimes they didn't speak at all. Their silence said everything. But as deep as their bond grew, it was shadowed by a truth neither could escape. Elvis was still tied to Priscilla, the young woman waiting for him back in Memphis. Their relationship was no secret to the world, and Elvis knew the responsibility that came with it. Every time his name appeared in the papers beside Ann-Margret's, the whispers grew louder. Reporters began following them, trying to capture even the smallest sign that the rumors were true. There were close calls, nights when photographers waited outside the hotels, days when a misplaced phone call nearly reached the wrong ears. The tension between love and duty began to pull at Elvis. He was torn between what he felt and what the world expected of him. For Ann-Margret, it was both beautiful and painful. She loved him not for his fame, but for his heart, the gentle man who joked, who cared, who wanted to live an ordinary life. But she also knew she couldn't have all of him. The end came quietly, without anger, without drama. One evening, after weeks of distance, the phone rang. She knew his voice the moment she heard it. It was soft, heavy with hesitation. Words came slowly, each one harder than the last. He told her it had to stop, that the world would never understand, that there were promises he couldn't break. When the call ended, she sat still for a long time, listening to the silence that followed. Days turned into weeks, and she threw herself back into her work. On the outside, Ann-Margret sparkled as brightly as ever. She smiled for the cameras, posed for magazines, and performed with her usual fire. But behind the glow, her heart carried the quiet ache of loss. She read about Elvis's marriage to Priscilla in the newspapers, her name printed just pages away. The picture showed a smiling couple, but Ann-Margret looked at it with tears she never let fall. She continued her career, appearing on stages and in films, the applause louder than ever. Yet sometimes, in the middle of a performance, she would hear one of Elvis's songs playing softly in the background, a melody floating from the orchestra or through the radio backstage. Her breath would catch, her eyes glisten, and for a fleeting moment she would feel the weight of everything they had shared. Then she would smile again, hiding the pain behind the grace that had always defined her. Years passed, and the world moved on, but some memories refused to fade. The late-night drives, the laughter, the quiet understanding, they lived on like echoes in her heart. She never spoke of it openly, but those who knew her best could see it in her eyes whenever his name was mentioned. Even after all the lights faded, his voice never left her. It was there in her memories, in the music that played softly when she was alone, in the silence between her thoughts. For Ann-Margret, what they shared was more than a fleeting romance. It was a connection that time could never erase, a secret love story written not in words, but in the quiet spaces between two hearts that once beat in perfect rhythm. The hidden connection. Even after their romance ended, something between Elvis Presley and Ann-Margret quietly endured. It was not loud or public, and it didn't belong to the world. It existed in silence, soft, private, and deeply personal. Though their lives went in different directions, a quiet thread seemed to tie them together, one that neither time nor distance could break. After Elvis married Priscilla and Ann-Margret continued her own journey in Hollywood, many believed their story was over. Yet behind the scenes, small gestures revealed that they had never truly let go. Each time Ann-Margret prepared for a new show or special performance, a familiar gift would arrive. A bouquet of flowers, always beautiful, always timed perfectly. There was no name on the card, no signature, but she never needed one. She always knew who had sent them. It became their silent ritual, a way of saying what could no longer be spoken. No letters, no calls, just flowers. Each bouquet carrying a memory, a reminder, a quiet connection that only they understood. Even when the years began to pass and the world around them changed, the flowers kept coming. To everyone else, they were simply tokens from an admirer. But to her, they were whispers from the past, gentle proof that he still remembered. The press often tried to stir old stories, hinting that their bond had never faded. Reporters asked questions, writers searched for answers, but neither of them ever confirmed a thing. Elvis never spoke of it. And Ann-Margret, with her soft smile and calm grace, always found a way to turn the conversation elsewhere. Her silence became its own kind of truth, protective, loyal, and full of meaning. Over the years, that silence grew heavier with mystery. Why didn't she ever tell their full story? Some said it was loyalty, others thought it was love, and a few believed it was pain too deep to reopen. Whatever the reason, she guarded their memories carefully, as if speaking them aloud would break something sacred. She once spoke only a few words about him, just enough to make people wonder even more. It was a hint that what they shared went beyond romance, something spiritual, something rare. As time went on and her life moved forward, the flowers stopped only once, after Elvis's death. That silence spoke louder than any words. For Ann-Margret, it was the end of an unspoken promise that had lasted for years. Yet even without the flowers, she felt his presence linger, in music, in memory, in the quiet moments when the world fell still. The mystery of their bond remained untouched and eternal. She never tried to explain it, perhaps because it couldn't be explained. It was love, friendship, and something beyond both. A hidden connection that lived on long after the music stopped, and somewhere deep in her heart she carried it, waiting for the day she would finally find the courage to speak of it all. How deep was their connection really? Let's dive into it. The day the music rested. It was August of 1977, and the warm summer air hung softly over Lake Tahoe. Ann-Margret was there, performing a series of shows that had drawn large, lively crowds. Her energy on stage was as bright as ever, her movements full of grace, her smile reaching every corner of the room. To her audience, she was the same vibrant star they had always known. Strong, glowing, untouchable. But that night, everything would change. The evening began like all the others. Backstage, the sound of laughter mixed with the hum of musicians tuning their instruments. Ann-Margret adjusted her costume in front of the mirror, the lights reflecting softly off her auburn hair. The band was ready, the audience waiting, the curtain about to rise. Then, just as the music was set to begin, someone hurried into her dressing room with a look she had never seen before. Pale, uncertain, trembling. They whispered a few words that froze her where she stood. Elvis Presley, the man who had once filled her world with warmth and laughter, was gone. He had been found lifeless in his home at Graceland earlier that day. For a moment, the world around her went completely still. The sound of the audience outside faded into nothing. The air in the room felt heavy, as if it carried the weight of all the memories they had shared. She tried to steady herself, to breathe, to understand what she had just heard, but the shock hit her like a wave. Moments later, as the curtain lifted and the spotlight found her, she stepped forward, then suddenly went weak. Her body trembled, her vision blurred, and before she could take another step, she fainted. The crowd gasped, unaware of what had happened. Her team rushed to her side. The show came to a halt, and that night's performance was quietly canceled. Later, in her dressing room, the silence was unbearable. The walls seemed to echo with his voice, the voice that once made her laugh and dream. On her table, where she often received bouquets before her shows, there were no flowers that night. For years, a familiar arrangement had always arrived before every major performance, simple, elegant, and unsigned. She had always known who they were from, but this time there was nothing. That empty space on her table told her everything. Ann-Margret sat alone for a long time, staring at the spot where the flowers used to be. She remembered his kindness, his laughter, and the quiet moments they had shared when the world wasn't watching. The man who had brought music and light to so many had gone silent forever. In the days that followed, the world mourned loudly. Crowds gathered outside Graceland, fans wept openly, and newspapers filled their front pages with his name. But Ann-Margret stayed quiet. She grieved in private, away from the cameras, because her memories belonged to her alone. When she finally went to Graceland, it was after the crowds had gone. She walked through the gates slowly, her heart heavy with memories. The house was calm, surrounded by flowers and stillness. She made her way to his resting place, where the sun was beginning to set. There were no reporters, no noise, only the sound of the wind moving gently through the trees. She stood there for a while, remembering the laughter they had shared on film sets and the moments of silence they had shared away from the world. Then she reached into her bag and took out a single red rose. She laid it down carefully, her hand trembling as she did. Some say she left a small note with it, though no one ever knew what it said. Others believe she left only tears. Whatever she placed there, it carried all the feelings she had never spoken: love, gratitude, and a quiet farewell. When she finally turned to leave, the sky above Graceland glowed with soft evening light. It was a peaceful kind of sadness, the kind that stays forever but no longer hurts the same way. The years after, grace and silence. As the years drifted by, Ann-Margret continued to shine in her own gentle light. She had survived heartbreak, fame, and the endless noise of Hollywood. Her beauty remained, but it was her grace that defined her. She built a life rooted not in the past, but in quiet strength, holding close the memories that had shaped her, yet choosing not to let them rule her. When she married Roger Smith, a talented actor and producer, the world watched with curiosity. Many wondered if anyone could fill the space that Elvis Presley once held in her heart. Yet, Roger did something rare. He gave her peace. He adored her not as a movie star, but as a woman. He managed her career, protected her from the chaos of fame, and stood beside her through every joy and storm. Their marriage lasted for 50 years, a rare treasure in Hollywood's ever-changing world. Ann-Margret thrived in this chapter of her life. She appeared in new films, performed on stage, and won awards, but she never let fame become her only story. She found balance, happiness, and deep companionship in her marriage. The two built a world of privacy, a space far from flashing lights, where love could breathe without judgment. Still, the shadow of the past lingered gently. Reporters often brought up Elvis, hoping to uncover secrets or stir emotion. Every time she smiled, a soft, knowing smile, and carefully changed the subject. She never spoke of him publicly, not even when documentaries, books, and interviews begged for her words. It wasn't out of bitterness or shame, it was respect. Some things, she believed, were too sacred to be shared. Perhaps she felt that speaking about him would betray what they once had. Their connection, though brief in time, had been filled with genuine warmth, laughter, and trust. They had been two young souls caught between fame and feeling, between stage lights and silence. For her, that love belonged to a time and place that no one else could ever touch. So she locked it away gently, not to forget, but to protect it. Through the years, her silence became a kind of strength. It told its own story, of dignity, of loyalty, of a woman who had lived deeply and chosen grace over gossip. While others wrote books and gave interviews about their memories of Elvis, Ann-Margret's quiet voice spoke louder than words ever could. As she aged, her beauty softened, but her spirit remained bright. She carried herself with elegance, always kind, always composed. Yet behind that calm smile, she carried a tenderness, the echo of a love that had once burned brightly and then was lost too soon. Sometimes people said they could see it in her eyes when she heard his music, or when someone mentioned his name. A flicker of light, a trace of sorrow. Time moves on, but the heart never fully forgets. The woman who had danced through decades of fame carried within her the memory of a man who had once changed everything. And though she had built a beautiful life of her own, one filled with laughter, love, and grace, there remained a quiet space in her heart, untouched and eternal. Now, at 84, as the years have grown softer and the world quieter around her, something inside her stirs. Perhaps it's time to open that locked door in her heart, to speak not out of pain, but out of peace. What did she say? Stick around, the revelation. Time has a gentle way of bringing things full circle. For Ann-Margret, now 84, the years have moved like slow waves, carrying her through laughter, loss, and quiet reflection. The world around her has changed. The bright lights of her youth have dimmed into a softer glow, and the applause that once filled her days has become a distant echo. Yet one memory, one name, has never faded completely: Elvis Presley. For decades, she remained silent about him. Reporters asked, writers speculated, fans wondered, but she always smiled that familiar, graceful smile and let the questions drift away unanswered. It wasn't secrecy, it was protection. What they shared belonged only to them, and for years, she kept that sacred space untouched. But now, at this late chapter of her life, Ann-Margret feels ready, not to reveal a scandal or reopen old wounds, but to honor something beautiful, something that had shaped her heart in quiet ways that never truly left. In a recent conversation, her words came slowly, softly, as if each one carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken thoughts. There was no bitterness in her voice, only gratitude, the kind that comes from remembering something pure. She spoke of him as if he were still just around the corner, as if time had not placed 4 long decades between them. She described Elvis not as the icon the world worshipped, but as the man behind the fame, kind, funny, and gentle in ways few ever saw. She remembered how he could make her laugh until her sides ached, how his eyes softened when the cameras stopped flashing, and how deeply he cared for the people around him. Fame, she said, never took away his humanity. Beneath the glittering suits and the roar of the crowd, there was a soul, sensitive, searching, and often lonely. She saw that side of him, the side hidden behind the legend, and she never forgot it. Their bond had not been built only on romance, but on something deeper. They were two performers at the height of fame, two spirits caught in the whirlwind of music and lights, yet finding comfort in each other's understanding. They shared laughter and long talks, inside jokes, and quiet moments that didn't need words. It wasn't just love, it was a friendship, a spiritual connection that went beyond what anyone else could see. As she spoke, it became clear why she had stayed silent all these years. The world often wants to turn tenderness into headlines, but Ann-Margret refused to let that happen. To her, what they shared was sacred, not meant for gossip or spectacle. She hadn't kept it secret out of shame, but out of love. It was theirs, untouched by the noise of fame or the curiosity of the world. She had carried it in her heart, protected like a delicate flame for nearly half a century. She said she had never regretted the time they had together, nor the fact that life had taken them down different paths. They had loved, they had laughed, and when the time came, they had let go. But with tenderness, not anger. For her, that was enough. Some stories don't need grand endings. They live quietly in memory, becoming part of who we are. Her tone was reflective, like someone watching the last light of sunset fade over calm water. There was peace in her eyes, not sorrow. The years had taught her that love, no matter how brief, can echo through a lifetime. She looked around her living room, filled with photographs, awards, and small reminders of a rich, full life, and paused at one frame resting beside her bed. Inside it was an old black-and-white photo of two young stars smiling at each other as if the world had disappeared. She picked it up with gentle hands, her fingers tracing the edges of his face. The photograph had followed her from home to home across decades. It had yellowed a little, but to her it was timeless. She whispered something under her breath, words only she and Elvis would understand. Perhaps it was a goodbye that had never been said, or maybe just a thank you. As she set the picture down, a soft breeze moved through the room, brushing against the curtains. It felt for a moment like music fading into silence, the last note of a song long finished but still lingering in the heart. Ann-Margret has lived a life of brilliance and grace. She has faced triumphs and heartbreak with dignity, always choosing love over regret. Even now, she carries herself with the same elegance that once made the world fall in love with her. That fiery red hair now silvered, her smile softer but no less radiant. The years have not dulled her light. They've only made it warmer. She speaks now not as a star, but as a woman who has known the beauty and fragility of life. Her voice, once full of youth and laughter, now carries wisdom and peace. The world still sees her as the legend she is, but she knows herself as simply Anne, the woman who once danced beside Elvis, who once shared quiet moments that no fame could ever touch. There is no sadness in her memories now, only gratitude for the time they had and for the lessons love taught her. Elvis's music still plays sometimes in her home, softly, like a memory visiting for a moment before drifting away again. When it does, she smiles, closes her eyes, and lets the melody carry her back. Not to fame, not to heartbreak, but to that simple feeling of connection they once shared. As the interview ends, the room grows still again. Outside, the sunlight dims, painting everything in a golden hue. Ann-Margret looks once more at that framed photo, her heart full, her mind quiet. The story she had kept hidden for so long has finally been spoken. Not to reopen old chapters, but to close them with grace. What do you think about Ann-Margret's confession? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, like, share, and subscribe to this channel for more celebrity gist. Before you go, watch the other videos on your screen.